Our next step is putting in our buttonholes, and the first thing you will need to do is work out where you would like your button to sit. So with your front of your dress facing towards you, just fold your back shoulder strap over your front of your dress and just place it how you think you might like it. I find when you're just sitting the dress flat together and you just pull over that tab and just fold it where the top bit sits. Fold it over so nothing's bunched. I find that sits nicest, but it's up to you. So I'm going to take my button and I am going to just see where I might like it on my tab, and I think it looks nice about there. So what I will do now is I will take a pin just to mark where my button sits, and so I will mark it via looking at where the holes of the button are, and I will pin in just there so I know where my button is going to sit, and I want it to sit central in my strap. So I will then fold my strap in half to find out exactly where my button will go, and I will pop another little pin in there so I know exactly where it wants to sit. And then I will just go ahead and I'm going to actually mark with my chalk where that button is going to sit. But with your pin still in your back strap, so you can get your matching spot on your opposite strap, just take your two back straps together, place them so they are matching, and with that pin just go ahead and press it through so that it pokes out through the other side, and you now know where your buttonhole will sit on the opposite side. And I'm just going to put another pin in where that one is so I can mark it on the right side of my fabric. Okay, like so. And because I've marked it, I'm just going to remove my pin, and there I have marked both of my buttonhole placements. Now the next step will be to sew your buttonhole in your dress, and this is also another tricky step, and I recommend doing a test buttonhole with your machine before you sew into your dress, just in case there are any mistakes or kinks to work out with your buttonhole foot. And each machine's different. Some are great, some are very sensitive. I have a sensitive machine, and so I've had to work out what it does and doesn't like, but I'm fairly confident with inserting my buttonhole, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. But follow your machine instructions to insert your buttonhole. So I'm putting my buttonhole foot in and just threading my threads through and selecting my buttonhole. Now I'm going to go ahead and sew my button hole in. I'm using my mark as my guide. Now I'll go ahead and sew my buttonhole. And my buttonhole is now complete. Your machine may not have a one-stepped buttonhole foot. It might be 3 or 4 steps, but just follow your instructions for your machine. So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to trim those little threads off, and then I'm going to open up my buttonhole. And so safest thing to do is to pop a pin into your newly sewn buttonhole, just so when you put your seam ripper in that you do not rip into your dress. So I'm going to go ahead and just open up my buttonhole like so, and now it's complete, ready for buttons to go in and out. And you just need to repeat this step with your second button, like so. With both buttonholes now sewn in, we will need to decide on our button placement. Now if you're making a reversible dress, you'll be sewing on 2 buttons. So I've got a yellow one for my lining or reverse side, and I've got my silver one for my main side. You may not be able to sew on 2 buttons if they are too bulky. I've chosen quite a flat one for my reverse fabric, so it shouldn't be too uncomfortable. So I'm just going to put my button on there and visually just see where I like it. There we go, out centre, and I'm just going to mark it like we did with the buttonholes with a pin, like so. I'm also going to just double check the centre here, and just make a little fold so I can see where the double check just where that centre line is. And so we will take a threaded needle that's been knotted at one end, and I'm going to place that through the centre of where we've marked and begin to sew the first button on to our dress. I'm just going to sew it through a couple of times, and then I will add on the back button and sew them together. Now I'll take my reverse button, and I'm just going to begin to sew that on too. Now it is important that you do not sew your buttons on too tightly, because we want to make sure that we can slip our buttons in through our buttonholes, and the dress slots over either of those buttons nicely. So I'm not sewing it too tightly, and it also ensures so we can finish the buttons off with no issues. So I'm just leaving a little bit of slack there. So they're on, but not too firmly. We'll just repeat this. I like to be quite sure when sewing on buttons. I don't want them to come off, so I will go through quite a few times just to make sure we don't get any loose buttons further down the track. And so once you're happy with the amount of stitching you've used to sew your buttons on, we will wrap around that thread a few times around the button here, and then I'm just going to tie it off by putting my needle through our thread there and then looping it through, so it just ties it in a knot. And I'll just repeat that just to make sure it doesn't come off. So our yellow button is done. Now I'll go ahead and repeat that with our silver button. And if you do it too tightly, you won't be able to slot your needle in under the buttons, so it's quite important when you're stitching to leave just enough room for that. And again, I will just tie it off. And again, just a second knot. Then repeat the process with your second button on the opposite side. And now I should have mentioned just earlier, you will also need to mark your second button much the same way as we marked our buttonholes. So just using that pin, you would place your two straps together, pop it through, so you know where to mark in your buttonhole. Alternatively, if you get stuck, just use your measuring tape or device and you can double check. So if you do get caught out, please go ahead and do that. Now so you should have both your buttons sewn on, and as you can see, the straps slot over nicely. And also again on the opposite side, your straps go over your buttons. And that is the last thing that you've needed to do on your dress, and it is complete. Well done, you have finished. You have now reached the end of the Alice A-line dress sewing tutorial patterned by Mummykins and me. Your dress should now be complete and ready to wear. thank you for joining me today, and I hope to see you next time. Goodbye.